Welcome to the Great Man Within podcast. Every episode designed to help you discover and live the great man within you. So I'm feeling a little bit vulnerable for today's episode because I'm about to share with you a pretty personal story about my sex life that was an audio recording I did in my morning journal. So I do audio recordings in my journal these days instead of writing things down. I just pull out my phone and the voice memo and I'll start recording different stories or whatever's really coming up for me after I do my morning breath work, my morning meditation, after I've had some coffee, and before I go to the outside world to look at emails or to phone calls or taking in any news. And this was something that I recorded about a month ago, never intending to share it on a larger scale audience, but after having re-listened to it, I thought that it had profound application for you, our listeners. And as we are doing this week of diving into sex and sexuality during this COVID era, I couldn't think of a better time to share this really personal story with you in the hopes that there's a benefit for you as well. So please enjoy. I found this quote a few years ago from the late, great Robin Williams that made me smile. And he said, "You see, the problem is God gave man both a brain and a penis, but only enough blood to run one of them at a time." I can certainly relate to that, and there's plenty of evidence from my life that would support that claim. And I'm wondering if you may feel the same as well. But fellas, I would like this conversation to be regarding a belief that we can be much more than that. You know, I've been thinking quite a bit over these last few years that there actually is a profound wisdom in the brain that rests between our legs, but we don't really listen to him. And, you know, I would say if I look back at my early years, I was dragged around by the whims of my dick. And I couldn't necessarily control when he would decide to show up in full force. And he would be pulled around by beautiful women, by pornography, by desires. It almost felt like I had no control whatsoever. And it was just stimulus, response, stimulus, response, stimulus, response. And I know that many of the men that I speak to or coach or that are in my mastermind have experienced something similar, particularly in their early years. But then as we get older, things start to shift and things start to change. And I don't think we listen to the wisdom that accumulates over the course of time. And I want to share a story with you that as I was going through it, I didn't know what was happening, but looking back on it now, it was actually a profound moment of awakening for me. So a few years ago, I was intensely communicating with a woman who I'd met here in New York City. It was a brief encounter. We had chemistry. And then it was just a short-lived interaction one-on-one. We didn't have a chance to spend any alone time together or be romantic, but she had to go home. She lived overseas. And we spent a few months together stoking the flames of our fire. There were pictures exchanged. There were sexual conversations. There was fantasy being discussed and explored and the potential of getting together in the future and what that would be like and what would happen then. And this is one of the most attractive women that I've ever had the honor to engage with in this way. Just profoundly beautiful woman inside and out. And there was an opportunity for us to get together where she was going to come to the United States and she was going to stay with me for a few days. And as you can imagine, it was something that we were both very much looking forward to. And we dialed up the sexual dialogue. And so it was going to be on when she got here. And as the day was coming closer, I started to feel that even though we were engaging in the sexual dialogue, that something was missing for me. Like my dick wasn't responding. Like it just wasn't as excited as I would traditionally be expected to be. And even though I was engaging in the dialogue, even though pictures were coming through that were everything I would have dreamed of, I found myself just like there was just something that shifted. And for the first, 37, 38 years of my life, this was the conversation. This was the woman, the type of woman that would be everything I would have wanted. And then now I'm finding that there was just an energy that was missing. And I ignored that. I was like, oh, when she gets here, that'll go away. Like, everything will snap back into shape. And when she showed up that night, and she came into my apartment, we sat down on the couch, I could feel that there was a resistance inside of me. And it was a resistance I'd never felt before in my life. But it was like I don't want this. I don't want something sexual. But I found myself caught in that moment because for months leading up to this, and she'd flown across over different countries, over the Atlantic Ocean to come and be with me. I felt the pressure to follow through, and she was really keen. And there was a moment where I didn't know what to do. I was caught, feeling like I couldn't pull the plug on something that the train was already barreling down the track. And she was keen, and she leaned in and started kissing me. And I went with it. And my dick showed up, but something was missing. It was almost like all of the sensations that I'd come accustomed to, they were gone. I was like, almost like an out-of-body experience. My body was in this, it was responding to this, but like I wasn't feeling anything on the inside. And clothes came off, we had sex, and the entire way through, I felt like I was doing something that I didn't want to be doing. And after it was over, I was a bit dazed and I didn't know how to communicate it, but I felt violated in some way. And the next day when I woke up, I felt sick to my stomach. I was disgusted. I almost felt like I was going to throw up. And I couldn't comprehend what was happening because I'd done something like this throughout my entire life. This was one of the most beautiful women that I'd ever been with. And when I say beautiful, I mean like physically, emotionally, spiritually. And I was sick. And I couldn't figure out how to communicate that to her. I didn't want to come close to her. I didn't want to have sex that next morning. I made excuses. She could feel something was going on, but didn't know quite what to attribute that to. And as the day went on, I recognized that I had engaged in something physical that I didn't want to, that I was emotionally and energetically resistant to, and yet I ignored all of that and I violated my own personal boundaries and desires. And I ended up communicating that in the most compassionate and honest way that I could that night, which was later that night, which was to tell her that something had shifted inside of me and I can't quite explain it, but I felt like I didn't want to go through with what we went through the evening before. But the fact that she had come so far and that we had discussed so much that I didn't feel like I had the choice to do that. I didn't feel the right to do that. And my feelings have shifted and I didn't know how to communicate it, but this is what I'm feeling today. And she was extraordinary. She was fantastic and welcomed that and appreciated my honesty. And there was pain on her side from feeling that type of rejection, because of course on some level it feels like a rejection. But she was phenomenal in embracing that. And we spent the next few days together in unbelievable connection and intimacy and friendship, but we never were sexual again. And as the days, weeks, months, and now years have rolled by, I've looked back at that. And it's allowed me to recognize that there are times where my dick has tried to communicate to me that I don't want to be going where you are trying to put me. And I've not listened. And there have been plenty of times from my history where afterwards I would feel guilt and shame. I would feel an emptiness. I would feel like this person who I just slept with was merely a vessel, a body for me to masturbate into. And I know that many of the men who I've spoken with, whether they were in the rooms of Sex Addicts Anonymous or outside of them, men who are total civilians who have never had an issue compulsively, can relate to this idea of being commanded to have sex, and then afterwards the guilt and the shame and these feelings of emptiness, but we ignore it. And there's actually wisdom being communicated that is telling us that we're doing something that's out of alignment with who we are and how we want to live our lives. But the irony is once that guilt and that shame dissipates, we almost seek, I know that I've sought sexual experiences to help me rid myself of that pain, of the guilt and the shame. And so the cycle perpetuates itself and it keeps going on and on. And we wonder why, I've wondered why things don't get better. So I believe there's a profound wisdom in the brain between our legs if we are willing to listen to them. And what I've started to recognize over these past few years is I've tried to ignore them. And since that experience, there were a few others after that where I either didn't get hard when I was with a woman, which it was an experience I'd never had before in my life. And I felt the shame and humiliation that came along with me not being able to get it up and her saying, "What's wrong?" And it turned out that I just wasn't desiring to be with her. Yet in the past, for so much of my life, I could have just thought myself into an erection, thought myself into sex, and then the sex would have happened. I would have had that momentary relief followed by either a short or prolonged period of, what the fuck am I doing? Why do I feel this way? Why do I feel so empty? Oh, fuck it, let's go do it again. Get rid of this feeling. And over these last few years, as I've started to recognize that these feelings of emptiness or my, quote, inability to perform in the moment had nothing to do with my physical dick not functioning. I don't need a pill, right? It's actually my evolution as a man and recognizing that what I value now is not just some transactional sexual experience. I'm craving intimacy and depth. And when that started to shift, I recognized that these flybys weren't for me anymore. And there's not enough conversation about something like this because as soon as your penis starts to change, your dick starts to evolve in its desires, the only social narrative that's just beaten over our heads, if you watch any football games, the NFL, it's, every commercial break, you've got a male enhancement pill shoved down your throat because it's believed to be something physical, physiological, and maybe you're getting older. Well, this is just what happens, so take a pill. And for me, for a while, I contemplated that maybe that's my issue. I didn't have that issue. I never took a pill. It wasn't that at all. These last few years, it's really been about listening to the wisdom of my dick. And now, when I find someone that I have depth and intimacy with, I'm all in, man. I got no problems whatsoever, no issues. Just I'm at attention, standing at attention, and I can feel a depth of connection and sex and intimacy that I've never experienced before. And after it's over, after the release is done, not every case do I release, but in the cases that I do, I feel clean. I feel powerful. I feel like I've just exchanged something meaningful with the woman who's lying in bed with me. And she can feel that from me too. So I share all of these stories and reflections with you, gentlemen, because I think that there's something a deeper wisdom that the brain between your legs is communicating to you if you are willing to listen. And there's no shame whatsoever in some of these feelings that you're experiencing right now, maybe experiencing, that don't feel so great after you finish masturbating, after you finish watching porn, or after you finish having sex. If there's a feeling that's not of alignment, that's just your body's way, that's just your soul's way of telling you that something doesn't fit with the version of the man that you aspire to be and how you are behaving right now. And there's no shame in that. Just listen to what he has to say. Because the brain between your legs is a much smarter one than we give ourselves credit for. Well, there you have it. That was the first time I've ever told that story in a public setting, and I hope you got something out of it. You know, if you're enjoying this style of sharing, where every so often I'll drop in one of my own personal audio journals for you to listen to and give you a glimpse deeper into my life and how I process through things personally, then one of the best ways you can let me know that is post this podcast to your Instagram story or on Facebook, and then, tag me and let me know that this is something that you really enjoy, and let other people know that there's something here to be gleaned and something of value that other people should be listening to. Let me know, tag me. I'll shoot you back a message and thank you for it. And if you have any insights that you want to share with me, drop it in the DMs as well. I'm on Instagram at Dominic Q. Very easy to find me at Dominic Q. And then on Facebook, it's Dominic Quartuccio. There's not too many of us out there. I hope you enjoyed this. Keep living the great man within.